rider on the road, weeks since he and Tam had gone in for their supper. He no longer felt the strip of cloth digging into his shoulders, but then he felt nothing in his shoulders except numbness, nor in his feet, for that matter. In between, it was another matter. His breath came in labored pants that had long since set his throat and lungs to burning, and hunger twisted his stomach into queasy sickness. Tam had fallen silent some time before. Rand was not sure how long it had been since the murmurs ceased, but he did not dare halt now to check on Tam. If he stopped, he would never be able to force himself to start out again. Anyway, whatever Tam's condition, he could do nothing beyond what he was doing. The only hope lay ahead in the village. He tried wearily to increase his pace, but his wooden legs continued their slow plod. He barely even noticed the cold or the wind. Vaguely, he caught the smell of wood smoke. At least he was almost there if he could smell the village chimneys. A tired smile had only begun on his face, though, when it turned to a frown. Smoke lay heavy in the air. Too heavy. With the weather, a fire might well be blazing away on every hearth in the village, but the smoke was still too strong. In his mind, he saw again the Trollocs on the road. Trollocs coming from the east, from the direction of Emmons Field. He peered ahead, trying to make out the first houses, and ready to shout for help at the first sight of anyone, even send Bowie or one of the Coplans. A small voice in the back of his head told him to hope someone there could still give help. Suddenly, a house became visible through the last bare-branched trees, and it was all he could do to keep his feet moving. Hope turning to sharp despair, he staggered into the village. Charred piles of rubble stood in the places of half the houses of Emmons Field. Soot-coated brick chimneys thrust like dirty fingers from heaps of blackened timbers. Thin wisps of smoke still rose from the ruins. Grimy-faced villagers, some yet in their night clothes, poked through the ashes, here pulling free a cookpot, there simply prodding forlornly at the wreckage with a stick. What little had been rescued from the flames dotted the streets. Tall mirrors and polished sideboards and high chests stood in the dust among chairs and tables, buried under bedding, cooking utensils, and meager piles of clothing and personal belongings. The destruction seemed scattered at random through the village. 5 houses marched untouched in one row, while in another place, a lone survivor stood surrounded by desolation. On the far side of the Wine Spring Water, the 3 huge Beltane bonfires roared, tended by a cluster of men. Thick columns of black smoke bent northward with the wind, flecked by careless sparks. One of Master Alvir's Duran stallions was dragging something Rand could not make out over the ground toward the wagon bridge and the flames. Before he was well out of the trees, a sooty-faced Harald Luhan hurried to him, clutching a woodsman's axe in one thick-fingered hand. The burly blacksmith's ash-smeared nightshirt hung to his boots, the angry red welt of a burn across his chest showing through a ragged tear. He dropped to one knee beside the litter. Tam's eyes were closed, and his breathing came low and hard. "Trollocs, boy?" Master Luhan asked in a low voice. "Here, too. Well, we may have been luckier than one is the right. He needs the wisdom. Now, where in the light is she?" Egwene, running by with her arms full of bedsheets torn into bandages, looked around at them without slowing. Her eyes stared at something in the far distance. Dark circles made them appear even larger than they actually were. Then she saw Rand and stopped, drawing a shuddering breath. "Not your father, is he? Come, I'll take you to Nynaeve." Rand was too tired, too stunned to speak. All through the night, Emmons Field had been a haven where he and Tam would be safe. Now all he could seem to do was stare in dismay at the He noticed odd details as if they were very important. The buttons down the back of her dress were done up, and her hands were clean. He wondered why her hands were clean when smudges of soot marked her cheeks. Master Luhan seemed to understand what had come over him. Laying his axe across the shaft, the blacksmith picked up the rear of the litter and gave it a gentle push, prodding him to follow Egwene. He stumbled after her as if walking in his sleep. He wondered how Master Luhan knew the creatures were Trollocs, but it was a fleeting thought. If Tam could recognize them, there was no reason why Harald Luhan could not. He was concentrating on following Egwene's slender shape. He had pulled himself together just enough to wish he would hurry. What the 2 men could manage with their burden. She led them halfway down the green and called them. char blackened the edges of its thatch, and smut stained the whitewashed walls. Of the houses on either side, only the foundation stones were left. 2 piles of ash and burned timbers. One had been the house of Baron Thane, one of the Miller's brothers. The other had been Abbot Hawkins, Nat's father. Even the chimneys had toppled. "Wait here," Egwene said, and gave them a look, expecting an answer. When they only stood there, she muttered something under her breath, then dashed inside. "Matt," Rand said. "Is he?" "Alright," the blacksmith said. He set down his end of the litter and scraped slowly. "I saw him only a little while ago. It's a wonder any of us are alive. The way they came after my house in the fort, you'd have thought I had gold and jewels in there. I'll have cracked one's skull with a frying pan." She took one look at the ashes of our house this morning and set out hunting around the village with the biggest hammer she could dig out of what's left of the forge, just in case any of them lived instead of running away. I could almost pity the thing if she finds one. He nodded to the Calder. Mistress Calder and 2 others took in some of those. The ones with no home of their own still standing. When the Wisdoms seen Tam, we'll find him a bed. The inn, maybe. The mayor offered it already. But Nynaeve said the hurt folk would heal better if there weren't so many of them together. Rand sank to his knees. Shrugging out of his blanket harness, he wearily busied himself with checking Tam's covers. Tam never moved or made a sound, even when Rand's wooden hands jostled him. But he was still breathing, at least. My father. The other was just the fever talking. "What if they come back?" he said dully. "The wheel weaves as the wheel wills," Master Luhan said uneasily. "They come back? Well, they're gone now. So we pick up the pieces, build up what's been torn down." He sighed, his face going slack as he knuckled the small of his back. For the first time, Rand realized that the heavy-set man was as tired as he was himself, if not more so. The blacksmith looked at the village, shaking his head. "I don't suppose today will be much of a bell time, but we'll make it. We always have." Abruptly, he took up his axe, and his face firmed. "There's work waiting for me. Don't you worry, lad. The Wisdom will take good care of him, and the light will take care of us all. And if the light doesn't, well, we'll just take care of ourselves. Remember, we're 2 Rivers folk." Still on his knees, Rand looked at the village as the blacksmith walked away. Really looked for the first time.
Take a look ahead.
Master Luhan was right, he thought, and was surprised that he was not surprised by what he saw. People still dug in the ruins of their homes, but even in the short time he had been there, more of them had begun to move with a sense of purpose. He could almost feel the growing determination. But, he wondered, they had seen Trollocs. Had they seen the black-cloaked rider? Had they felt his hatred? Nynaeve and Egwene appeared from the Calder house, and he sprang to his feet. Or rather, he tried to spring to his feet. It was more of a stumbling lurch that almost put him on his face in the dust. The Wisdom dropped to her knees beside the litter without giving him so much as a glance. Her face and dress were even dirtier than Egwene's, and the same dark circles lined her eyes, though her hands, too, were clean. She felt Tam's face and thumbed open his eyelids. With a frown, she pulled down the coverings and eased the bandage aside to look at the wound. Before Rand could see what lay underneath, she had replaced the wadded cloth. Sighing, she smoothed the blanket and cloak back up to Tam's neck with a gentle touch, as if tucking a child in for the night. "There's nothing I can do," she said. She had to put her hands on her knees to straighten up. "I'm sorry, Rand." For a moment he stood, not understanding, as she started back to the house. Then he scrambled after her and pulled her around to face him. "He's dying," he cried. "I know," she said simply, and he sagged with the matter-of-factness of it. "You have to do something. You have to. You're the Wisdom." Pain twisted her face, but only for an instant. Then she was all hollow-eyed resolve again, her voice emotionless and firm. "Yes, I am. I know what I can do with my medicines, and I know when it's too late. Don't you think I would do something if I could? But I can't. I can't, Rand. And there are others who need me. People I can help." "I brought him to you as quickly as I could," he mumbled. Even with the village in ruins, there had been the wisdom for hope. With that gone, he was empty. "I know you did," she said gently. She touched his cheek with her hand. "You It isn't your fault.
Attention
The
all
best
units.
anyone could.
This is Director Roche.
I am sorry,
SciComm Division.
but I have others to tend to.
Cocoon is caught in the grip of a pulse-borne terror.
Vacantly, he stared after
If we
her
allow
until
the
the door of the
siege
house closed
activity
behind
to
her.
continue,
He could not make any thought come,
will rip
except that
our
she would
world
not help.
apart. The
Suddenly,
peace
he
and
was knocked
stability
back a
we have
step as
fought
Egwene
so
cannoned
hard
into
to
him,
maintain
throwing her arms around him.
will be nothing
Her
but
hug was hard
memory.
enough to bring a grunt from him any other time. Now he only looked silently at the door
Hopeless
behind which
egrets
his
are
hopes had
very way
vanished.
of life.
I'm so
They
sorry,
must
Rand,
be
he
eliminated.
said against his chest. Blind,
There
I
can
wish there was
be
something I
no
could do.
hesitation.
Numbly, he put his arms around her.
That is all.
I know. I have to do something, Egwene. I don't know what, but I can't just let him...
If we fail,
His voice
our
broke.
citizens
She hugged him harder.
pay the price.
Egwene! At Nynaeve's shout from the house, Egwene jumped. Egwene, I need you. And wash your hands again.
Task
She pushed
force
herself free
reporting.
from Rand's arms.
Begin operations
She needs my
immediately.
help, Rand.
Sir,
Egwene! He
We
thought
can
he heard
make
a
it.
sob as she spun
Get to
away
the
from him.
station and board the train
Then
for
she was
Eden.
gone, and he was
think
left
it's
alone
still
beside the
running?
litter. For a
Well,
moment,
if
he
it
looked
isn't,
down at Tam,
we'll make
feeling
it
nothing
run.
but hollow helplessness.
Then punch
Suddenly
straight into
his
the heart
face
of the
hardened.
sanctum.
The mayor will know what to
Now
do,
you're
he
thinking
said,
like a pulseless
lifting the
seed.
shafts once more. The
Well,
mayor
this
will
is
know.
Operation Nora.
Bran Elvir
It's not
always
just
knew
snow
what
I'm
to do.
after. The sanctum's got to
With
pay
weary
too.
obstinacy, he set out for the Wine Spring Inn.
Hey,
Another
You're
of
the
the
one who
Duran
said we had to
stallions
fight.
passed him, its harness
Every
straps
minute we
tied
waste,
around the
we're
ankles
tempting
of a big
fate.
shape, draped with a dirty blanket.
there's some underground tunnels not
Arms
far from
covered
here.
with coarse hair.
I used to
dragged
play
in
in them
the
when
dirt
I was a
behind the
kid.
blanket.
No one
And one
uses
corner
the
was
entrance
pushed up to
anymore.
reveal a
So even
goat's
the army
horn.
doesn't know about it. But I know where it
The Two
is.
Rivers was no
We
place
can
for
sneak in
stories
under
to
their
become
noses.
horribly real. If Trollocs belonged anywhere,
Sounds
it was in
good.
the world outside.
Great.
For places
Here we
where they
go.
had Aes Sedai and false dragons. And the light alone knew what else come to life out of the tales of Gleeman. Not the Two Rivers. Not Emond's Field. As he made his way down the green, people called to him, some from the ruins of their homes, asking if they could help. He heard them only as murmurs in the background, even when they walked alongside
No
him for
more
a distance
rivalries
as they
now.
spoke. Without really thinking
SciComm's
about it,
brought in
he
the
managed
Guardian
words
Corps.
that said he needed no help, that everything was
Okay.
being taken care of.
There's an old
When
drainage
they left
pipe.
him, with worried looks and sometimes a comment about
We
sending
can use
Nynaeve
it
to
to
him,
avoid being
he
seen.
noticed that just as little. All he let himself
The
be
tunnel
aware of
entrance
was
is a
the
little
purpose he
further
had
up.
fixed in his head. Bran Alvear could do something to help Tam. What that could be, he tried not to dwell on. But the mayor would be able to do something, to think of something.
Follow me!
The inn had almost completely escaped the destruction that had taken half the village. A few scorch marks marred its walls, but the red roof tiles glittered in the sunlight as brightly as ever. All that was left of the peddler's wagon, though, were blackened iron wheel rims leaning against the charred wagon box, now on the ground. The big round hoops that had held up the canvas cover slanted crazily, each at a different angle. Tom Maryland sat cross-legged on the old foundation stones, carefully snipping singed edges from the patches on his cloak with a pair of small scissors. He set down cloak and scissors when Rand drew near. Without asking if Rand needed or wanted help, he hopped down and picked up the back of the litter.
Inside? Of course, of course. Don't you worry, boy. Your wisdom will take care of him. I've watched her work since last night, and she has a deft touch and a sure skill. It could be a lot worse. Some died last night. Not many, perhaps, but any at all are too many for me. Old Fame just disappeared, and that's the worst of all. Trollocs will eat anything. You should thank the light your father is still here, and alive for the wisdom to heal.
Rand blotted out the words, "He is my father," reducing the voice to meaningless sound that he noticed no more than a fly's buzzing. He could not bear any more sympathy, any more attempts to boost his spirits. Not now. Not until Bran Alvear told him how to help Tam. Suddenly he found himself facing something scrawled on the inn door. A curving line scratched with a charred stick. A charcoal teardrop balanced on its point. So much had happened that it hardly surprised him to find the dragon's fang marked on the door of the Wine Spring Inn. Why anyone would want to accuse the innkeeper or his family of evil, or bring the inn bad luck, was beyond him. But the night had convinced him of one thing. Anything was possible.
As we're fighting.
Anything at all. At a push from the Gleeman, he lifted the latch and went in. The common room was empty except for Bran Alvear. And cold, too, for no one had found time to lay a fire. The mayor sat at one of the tables, dipping his pen in an inkwell with a frown of concentration on his face, and his gray-fringed head bent over a sheet of parchment. Nightshirt tucked hastily into his trousers, and bagging around his considerable waist, he absently scratched at one bare foot with the toes of the other. His feet were dirty, as if he had been outside more than once without bothering about boots, despite the cold. "What's your trouble?" he demanded without looking up. "Be quick with it. I have 24 things to do right this minute, and more that should have been done an hour ago. So I have little time or patience. Well, out with it." "Master Alvier," Rand said. "It's my father." The mayor's head jerked up. "Rand! Tam!" He threw down the pen and knocked over his chair as he leaped up. "Perhaps the light hasn't abandoned us altogether. I was afraid you were both dead." Bella galloped into the village an hour after the Trollocs left, lathered and blowing as if she'd run all the way from the farm. And I thought, no time for that now. We'll take him upstairs. He seized the rear of the litter, shouldering the Gleeman out of the way. "You go get the wisdom, Master Merlin, and tell her I said hurry, or I'll know the reason why. Rest easy, Tam. We'll soon have you in a good soft bed. Go, Gleeman, go!" Tom Merlin vanished through the doorway before Rand could speak. "Nynaeve wouldn't do anything. She said she couldn't help him. I knew. I hoped you'd think of something." Master Alvier looked at Tam more sharply, then shook his head. "We'll see, boy. We'll see." But he no longer sounded confident. "Let's get him into a bed. He can rest easy at least." Rand let himself be prodded toward the stairs at the back of the common room. He tried hard to keep his certainty that somehow Tam would be all right. But it had been thin to begin with, he realized, and the sudden doubt in the mayor's voice shook him. On the second floor of the inn, at the front, were half a dozen snug, well-appointed rooms with windows overlooking the green. Mostly they were used by the peddlers, or people down from Watch Hill or up from Devon Ride. But the merchants who came each year were often surprised to find such comfortable rooms. 3 of them were taken now, and the mayor hurried Rand to one of the unused ones. Quickly, the down comforter and blankets were stripped back on the wide bed, and Tam was transferred to the thick feather mattress with goose-down pillows tucked under his head. He made no sound beyond hoarse breathing as he was moved, not even a groan, but the mayor brushed away Rand's concern, telling him to set a fire to take the chill off the room. While Rand dug wood and kindling from the wood box next to the fireplace, Rand threw back the curtains on the room, letting in the morning light, then began to gently wash Tam's face. By the time the Gleeman returned, the blaze on the hearth was warming the room. "She will not come," Tom Merlin announced as he stalked into the room. He glared at Rand, his bushy white brows drawing down sharply. "You didn't tell me she had seen him already. She almost took my head off." "I thought... I don't know. Maybe the mayor could do something. Could make her see." Hands clenched in anxious fists, Rand turned from the fireplace to Bran. "Master Alvier, what can I do?" The rotund man shook his head helplessly. He laid a freshly dampened cloth on Tam's forehead and avoided meeting Rand's eyes. "I can't just watch him die, Master Alvier. I have to do something." The Gleeman shifted as if to speak. Rand rounded on him eagerly. "Do you have an idea? I'll try anything." "I was just wondering," Tom said, tamping his long-stemmed pipe with his thumb, "if the mayor knew who scrawled the dragon's fang on his door." He peered into the bowl, then looked at Tam and replaced the unlit pipe between his teeth with a sigh. "Someone seems not to like him anymore. Maybe it's his guests they don't like." Rand gave him a disgusted look and turned away to stare into the fire. His thoughts danced like the flames, and like the flames, they concentrated fixedly on one thing.
Way into the tunnels is over there.
He would not give up. He could not just stand there and watch Tam die. "My father," he thought fiercely. "My father." Once the fever was gone, that could be cleared up as well. But the how? Rand's mouth tightened as he looked at Rand's back. The glare he directed at the Gleeman would have given a bit of pause, but Tom just waited expectantly as if he had not noticed it. "It's probably the work of one of the Congers or a Coplin," the mayor said finally, "though the light alone knows which. They're a large brood, and if there's ill to be said of someone, or even if there isn't, they'll say it. They make Sen Bui sound honey.
This way!
That wagon load who came in just before dawn?" the Gleeman asked. "They hadn't so much as smelled a fella. All they wanted to know was when festival was going to start, if they couldn't see half the village." Master Alvier.
That's it, Hope.
"One branch of the family, but none of them are very different. That fool Jarl Coplin spent half the night demanding I put Mistress Moraine and the Master Lan out of the inn, out of the village, as if there would be any village at all left without them. Rand had only half listened to the conversation, but this last tugged him to speak. What did they do? Why, she called ball lightning out of the clear night sky, Master Alvear replied. Sent it darting straight at the Trollocs. You've seen trees shattered by it. The Trollocs stood it no better. Moraine? Rand said incredulously, and the mayor nodded. Mistress Moraine. And Master Lan was a whirlwind with that sword of his. His sword! The man himself is a weapon, and in 10 places at once, or so it seemed. Burned me, but I still wouldn't believe it if I couldn't step outside and see. He rubbed a hand over his bald head. Winter night visits just beginning, our hands full of presents and honey cakes and our heads full of wine. Then the dogs snarling, and suddenly the 2 of them burst out of the inn, running through the village shouting about Trollocs. I thought they'd had too much wine. After all, Trollocs? Then, before anyone knew what was happening, those things were right in the streets with us, slashing at people with their swords, torching houses, howling to freeze a man's blood. He made a sound of disgust in his throat. We just ran like chickens with a fox in the hen yard till Master Lan put some backbone
Out
into
of
us.
my way!
Tom said. Did as well as anyone could. Not every Trolloc lying out there felt
Be ready for the next fight.
Master Alvear gave himself a shake. It's still almost too much to believe. An Aes Sedai in Emond's Field, and Master Lan as a warder. Aes Sedai? Rand whispered. She can't be. I talked to her. She doesn't. Did you think they wore signs? The mayor said wryly. Aes Sedai painted across their backs. Maybe stay away. Suddenly he slapped his forehead.
Be ready for the next fight.
Aes Sedai. I'm an old fool and losing my wits. There's a chance, Rand, if you're willing to take it. I can't tell you to do it, and I don't know if I'd have the nerve if it were me. A chance? Rand said. I'll take any chance if it'll help. Aes Sedai can heal, Rand. Burn me, lad, you've heard the stories. They can cure where medicines fail. Gleeman, you should have remembered that better than I. Gleeman's tales are full of Aes Sedai. Why didn't you speak up instead of letting me flail around? I'm a stranger here, Tom said, looking longingly at his unlit pipe. And Goodman Copland isn't the only one who wants nothing to do with Aes Sedai. Best the idea came
There should
from
be
you.
another drainage pipe.
Aes Sedai, Rand muttered, trying to make the woman who had smiled at him fit the stories. Help from an Aes Sedai was sometimes worse than no help at all, so the stories said, like poison in a pie. Their gifts always had a hook, like fish. Suddenly the coin in his pocket, the coin Moraine had given him, seemed like a burning coal. It was all he could do not to rip it out of his coat and throw it out the window. Nobody wants to get involved with Aes Sedai, lad, the mayor said slowly. It is the only chance I can see, but it's still no small decision. I cannot make it for you, but I have seen nothing but good from Mistress Moraine. Moraine Sedai, I should call her, I suppose. Sometimes, he gave a meaningful look at Tam. You have to take a chance, even if it's real one. Some of the stories are exaggerated in a way, Tom added. The words are being dragged from him. Some of them.
Stay down!
Tam still had not moved a muscle. His eyes
Target's a
were
target.
I'll go find her. The other side of the bridges, the Gleeman said, where they are disposing of the dead Trollocs. But be careful, boy. Aes Sedai do what they do for reasons of their own, and they aren't always the reasons others think. The last was a shout that followed Rand through the door. He had to hold on to the sword hilt to keep the scabbard from tangling in his legs as he ran, but he would not take the time to remove it. He clattered down the stairs and dashed out of the inn, tiredness forgotten for the moment. The chance for Tam, however small, was enough to overcome a night without sleep, for a time at least. That the chance came from an Aes Sedai, or what the price of it might be, he did not want to consider. But as for actually facing an Aes Sedai, he took a deep breath and tried to move faster. The bonfire stood well beyond the last houses to the north on the west side of the road to Watch Hill. The wind still carried the oily black columns of smoke away from the village, but even so, a sickly sweet stink filled the air, like a roast left hours too long on the spit. Rand gagged at the smell, then swallowed hard when he realized its source. A fine thing to do with Beltane fires. The men tending the fires had claws tied over their noses and mouths, but their grimaces made it plain that vinegar dampening the claws was not enough. Even if it did kill the flames, they still needed to what they were doing. Two of the men were untrained to harness one of the big urine on its ankles. Lamb, standing beside the body, tossed back the blanket enough to reveal the Trollocs' shoulders near the head. As Ram brought it up, the warder unfastened a metal badge. Blood red enamel spotted from one spiked shoulder of the Trollocs. Cody, he announced. He bounced the badge on his palm, snatched it out of the air with a growl. 7 bands so far. Moraine, seated cross-legged on the ground a short distance off, shook her head tiredly. A walking staff covered from end to end in carved vines and flowers lay across her knees, and her dress had the rumpled look of having been worn too long. 7 bands. 7. That many have not acted together since the Trolloc Wars. Bad news piles on bad news. I'm afraid, Lan. I thought we had gained a march, but we may be further behind than ever. Rand stared at her, unable to speak. Aes Sedai. He'd been trying to convince himself that she would not look any different now that he knew what he was looking at. And to his surprise, she did not. She was no longer quite so pristine, not with wisps of her hair sticking out in all directions, and a faint streak of soot across her nose, yet not really different either. Surely there must be something about an Aes Sedai to mark her for what she was. On the other hand, if outward appearance reflected what was inside, and if the stories were true, then she should look closer to a Trolloc than to a more than handsome woman whose dignity was not dented by sitting in the dirt. And she could help Tam. Whatever the cost, there was that before anything else. He took a deep breath. Mistress Moraine. Moraine Sedai. Both turned to look at him, and he froze under her gaze. Not the calm, smiling gaze he remembered from the Green. Her face was tired, but her dark eyes were a hawk's eyes. Aes Sedai, breakers of the world, puppeteers who pulled strings and made thrones and nations dance in designs only the women from Tar Valon knew. A little more light in the darkness, the Aes Sedai murmured. She raised her voice. How are your dreams, Randolph Thor? He stared at her.
Don't worry, it'll be fine. Only kids like me know about that
give a man
entrance.
bad dreams,
find it.
Rand. If
They'll
you have
call in a
nightmares,
team
you
and
must
canvass
tell
the
him.
whole tunnel system.
I can help with
Then we
bad
better
dreams
hurry.
sometimes.
So,
There's nothing
where's
wrong
this
with
thing
my...
come out anyway?
It's my father.
Well,
He's hurt.
It...
It's not much more than a scratch, but the
I
fever
don't really
is
know
burning
for
him up.
sure.
The wisdom
We'll
won't
find
help.
out today.
She says she can't. But the stories... She raised an eyebrow, and he stopped and swallowed hard. Light. Is there a story with an Aes Sedai where she isn't the villain?
I think I remember
He
learning
looked
about
at the warder, but Lan appeared more interested in the dead Trolloc than in anything Rand might say. Fumbling his way under her eyes, he went on. It said Aes Sedai can heal. If you can help him, anything you can do for him, whatever the cost. He took a deep breath and finished up in a rush. I'll pay any price in my power if you help him. Anything. Any price? Moraine mused, half to herself. We will speak of prices later, Rand, if at all. I can make no promises. Your wisdom knows what she is about. I will do what I can, but it is beyond my power to stop the wheel from turning. Death comes sooner or later to everyone, the warder said grimly. Unless they serve the darkness, and only fools are willing to pay that price. Moraine made a comment. Do not be so gloomy, Lan. You have some reason to suffer. A small one, but a real. She used the staff to pull herself to her feet. Take me to your father, Rand. I will help him as much as I am able. Too many here have refused to let me help at all. They have heard the stories, too, she added dryly. He's at the inn, Rand said. This way. And thank you. Thank you. They followed, but his pace took him quickly ahead. He slowed impatiently for them to catch up, then darted ahead again and had to wait again. Please hurry, he urged, so caught up in actually getting help. But he never took the temerity of prodding an Aes Sedai. The fever is burning him up. Lan said. Can't you see she's tired? Even with an Angreal, what she did last night was like running around the village with a sack of stones on her back. I don't know that you are weak, no matter what she
here.
close.
Thanks.
Did he think only of taking care of me? Or should he not think the same of his
Just
father?
another battle.
Lance scowled, but fell silent. I'm coming as quickly as I can, man, I promise you. The fierceness of her eyes, or the calm of her voice, not gentle exactly, more firmly in command. Rand did not know which to believe. Or perhaps they did go together. Aes Sedai.
It's the city's
He
food
was
production
committed now.
fallacy.
He matched his stride to theirs and tried not to think of
Name's
what the price might
Carbuncle.
be that they would talk about later. Chapter 8.
That's one of our
A place of
enemies,
safety.
being Sanctum and all.
While he was still coming through the door,
So,
Rand's eyes went to his father.
Kill him and
His
cut
father,
off
no
the
matter
food
what anyone
supply.
said.
That'll make us popular.
Taminat moved an inch. His eyes were still shut and his breath
I
came
think
in
people have
labored
enough
gasps,
reason to hate us,
slow
don't
and
you?
rasping. The white-haired gleeman cut off a
Yeah,
conversation with the
you're
mayor,
probably
who
right.
was bent over the bed again,
Hungry
tending
people
Tam.
make for angry people.
Gave Moraine an uneasy look. The Aes Sedai ignored him. Indeed, she ignored everyone except for Tam.
Why
But
don't
at
we
him,
use
she
that as a
stared with an
landmark?
intent frown. Tom stuck his unlit pipe between his teeth, then snatched it out again and glowered at it. Man cannot even smoke in peace, he muttered.
Let's head for the fallacy
I'd
in
better
the
make
center.
sure some karma doesn't steal my cloak. Cow war. At least I can have my pipe out there. Down the room. Lance stared after him, his angular face expressionless.
Nothing personal.
There's something about him
No
I don't
problem.
trust. I did not see a hair of him last night. He was there, Rand said, watching Moraine uncertainly. He must have been. His cloak did not get singed in front of the fireplace. Rand did not care if the gleeman had spent the night hiding in the stable. My father, he said to Moraine pleadingly. Bran opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Moraine said, leave me with him, Master Almeida. There is nothing you can do here now, except get in my way. For a minute, Bran hesitated, torn between dislike of being ordered about in his own inn, and reluctance to disobey an Aes Sedai. Finally, he straightened up to clap Rand on the shoulder. Come along, boy. Let us leave Moraine Sedai to her. There's plenty you can give me a hand with downstairs. Before you know it, Tam will be shouting for his pipe and a mug of ale. Can I stay? Rand spoke to Moraine, though she did not really seem to be aware of anyone besides Tam. Brand's hand tightened, but Rand ignored him. Please. I'll keep out of your way. You won't even know I'm here. He's my father. He added with a fierceness that startled him, widened the mayor's eyes in surprise. Rand hoped the others put it down to tiredness or the strange feeling of Aes Sedai. Yes, Moraine said impatiently. She had tossed her cloak and staff carelessly across the only door. Now she pushed up the sleeves of her gown, baring her arms to her elbows. Her attention never really left Tam, even while she spoke.
We got this under control.
She gestured vaguely in the direction of a long bench against the wall. Her eyes traveled slowly from Tam's feet to his head, but Rand was quickly feeling that she was looking beyond him in some fashion. When they talk to you, she went on after him, but do it quietly. Now you go, my son. This is a sick room, not a gathering hall. See that I am not disturbed. The mayor grumbled under his breath, though not loudly enough to catch her attention, of course, squeezed Rand's shoulder again, then obediently, if reluctantly, closed the door behind him. Muttering to herself, the Aes Sedai knelt beside the bed and rested her hands lightly on Tam's chest. She closed her eyes, and for a long time she neither moved nor made a sound. In the stories, Aes Sedai wonders were always accompanied by flashes and thunderclaps or other signs to indicate mighty works and great powers. The power. The one power. Drawn from the true source that drove the Wheel of Time.
Look at us. Pulseless
That was not something Rand
using
wanted
a
to think
Sanctum
about.
fallacy to tell
The
where
power
we're going.
involved with Tam.
Sort of strange.
Himself in the same
Not
room
really.
where the power might be used.
We've relied on them our whole lives.
In the same village was bad
The
enough.
food we eat,
For all he could
the
tell,
light
though,
and
Moraine might
water.
just as well have gone to sleep.
it's all from the Fal'Cie.
But he thought Tam's breathing sounded
know,
easier.
I think Cocoon
She must be doing
was
something.
really built for them.
So intent was he that he jumped
The
when
rest of
Lan
us?
spoke softly.
We're just leeches.
That is a fine
Parasites.
weapon you wear.
You think?
Is there by chance a heron on the
Protect
blade
us.
as well?
Nurture us.
For a moment,
They take
Rand
care
stared
of-
at the warder,
well,
not grasping what it was he
normal
was
people.
talking about. He had completely
treat us
forgotten
like we're
Tam's
special.
sword in the lather of dealing with an Aes
Almost like-
Sedai. It did not seem so heavy anymore.
Like we're pets.
Yes, there is. But what is she doing? I'd not have thought to find a heron-marked sword in a place like this, Lan said. It belongs to my father. He glanced at Lan's
then,
sword, the hilt just visible
you're
at the edge
just
of his
pets.
cloak. The two swords did look a good deal alike, except that no
That's it.
herons showed on the warders.
Now it makes
He
sense.
swung his eyes back to the bed. Tam's breathing did sound easier.
been
The
so
rasp was
blind.
gone. He was sure of it. He bought it a long
I
time
was
ago.
born into a Fal'Cie
Strange
world,
thing for a shepherd.
raised on a Fal'Cie leash.
Rand spared a sidelong look
It
for
was the
Lan.
only life
For a
I
stranger
knew.
to wonder about the sword was prying. For a warder to
When
do
it was taken from me,
Still, he felt he
I
had to
was
say
completely
something.
lost,
He never had any use for it that I know of. He said it had
without
no
a
use.
master to follow.
Until last night, anyway.
My life.
I didn't even
had
know he
no
had it till
purpose.
then. He called it useless, did he?
Hope,
He must not always
Listen
have
to
thought
me.
so. Lan touched the scabbard at Rand's waist
this
briefly with one
Lassie
finger.
curse. It took
There are
everything
places
from
where
me.
the heron is a symbol of the master
My
swordsman.
future. My
That blade
dreams.
must have traveled a strange road
I
to end up
didn't
with a
wanna
sheepherder in the
think.
Two Rivers.
So I
Rand
fought
ignored the
instead.
unspoken question.
As
Moraine
long as I
still
was
had not
fighting,
moved.
nothing else
Was
was
the
real.
Aes Sedai doing anything? He shivered,
running away.
rubbed his arms, not sure he really wanted to know what she was doing.
And you, Hope,
Aes Sedai.
you got
A
swept
question of
along
his
with
own
me.
popped into his head then. One he did not want to ask,
But
one he
Lightning,
needed an
I
answer to.
don't understand.
The mayor. He cleared his throat and took a deep breath. The mayor said the only
Operation
reason there's
Nova
anything
is
left of the
over.
village is because of you and her.
What?
He made himself look at the warder.
I
If you had been told about a man in the woods,
No!
a man
You
who made
told
people
me to
afraid just
fight.
by looking at them,
made a mistake!
would that have warned you?
What?
A man whose horse doesn't make any
You
noise,
can't do this.
and the wind doesn't touch his cloak.
You can't just
Would you have known what
build
was going to
something
happen?
up like that.
Could you and Moraine
Then
Sedai
abandon
have
me.
stopped it if you'd known about him? Not without half a dozen of my
I
sisters,
won't abandon
Moraine
you.
said, and Rand started.
I won't.
She still knelt by the bed, but she had taken her hands from Tam and half turned to face the two of them on the bench. Her voice never raised, but her eyes pinned Rand to the wall. Had I known when I left Tar Valon that I would find Trollocs and Myrddraal here, I would have brought half a dozen of them. A dozen, if I had to drag them by the scruffs of their necks. By myself, a month's warning would have made little difference. Perhaps none. There is only so much one person can do, even calling on the one power. And there were probably well over 100 Trollocs scattered around this district last night. An entire
Can't
fist.
just throw in the towel.
It would still have been good to know, Rand said sharply. The sharpness
Just
directed at
forget
Rand.
about all this.
When did you see him, exactly? And where? That's of no consequence now. Rand said. I will not avoid thinking he is...
You're open!
I am... That was the Ravens. The way it behaved should have... I was overconfident.
Target acquired!
Carrion eaters. Lance twisted in his taste. The Dark One's minions often find spies among creatures that feed on death. Ravens and crows mainly. Rats in the cities sometimes. A quick shiver ran through Rand. Ravens and crows as spies of the Dark One? There were ravens and crows everywhere now. The Dark One's touch, Moraine had said. The Dark One was always there, he knew that. But if you tried to walk in the light, tried to live a good life, and did not name him, he could not harm you. That was what everybody believed, what everybody learned with his mother's milk. But Moraine seemed to be saying it. His glance fell on Tam, and everything else was pushed right out of his head. His father's face was noticeably less flushed than it had been, and his breathing sounded almost normal. He would have leaped up. Moraine shook her head inside. Trolloc weapons are made in forges in the valley called Thankandar.
You're going down!
Some of them take a taint from that place, a stain of evil in the metal. Those tainted blades make wounds that will not heal unaided, or cause deadly fevers, strange sicknesses that medicines cannot touch. I have soothed your father's pain, but the mark, the taint, is still there. Left alone, it will grow again and consume him. But you won't leave it alone. Rand's words were half plea, half command. He was shocked to realize he had spoken to an Aes Sedai like that, but she seemed not to notice his tone. I will not, she agreed simply. I'm very tired, Rand, and I have had no chance to rest since last night. Ordinarily, it would not matter, but for this kind of hurt, This, she took a small bundle of white silk from her pouch, is an Angreal. She saw his expression. You know of Angreal, then? Good. Unconsciously, he leaned back further away from her and what she held. A few stories mentioned Angreal, those relics of the Age of Legends that Aes Sedai used to perform their greatest wonders. He was startled to see her unwrap a smooth ivory figurine, age-darkened to deep brown. No longer than her hand, it was a woman in flowing robes, with long hair falling about her shoulders. We have lost the making of these, she said. So much is lost. Never to be found again. So few remain. The Amerlin seemed almost to not allow me to take this one. It is well for Emond's Field and for your father that she did give her permission. But you must not hope too much. Now, even with it, I can do little more than I could have without it yesterday. The taint is strong. It has had time to fester. Fran said, I know you. Smile, there, curving of her lips. One hand the other cupped the ivory figure. Eyes closed, her face took on a look of concentration. She scarcely seemed to breathe. That rider you spoke, Lan said quietly. The one who made you afraid. That was surely a Myrddraal. A Myrddraal? Van exclaimed. But Fades are 20 feet tall and... The words faded away under the warder's mirthless grin. Sometimes, sheepherder, stories make things larger than truth. Believe me, the truth is big enough to happen. Half-man, lurk, fade, shadow man. The name depends on the language, but they all mean Myrddraal. Fade, throwbacks almost to the human stock that Jethro used to make.
Take this!
The human so is the taint that fits to the quality. Half-man have powers of a god. Only the weakest outside is going to be a match for Fade.
You're open!
A good man and true as far as since the wars that ended the Age of Legends, since the Forsaken were found, they have been the brain that tells the Trolloc fists where to strike. The days of the Trolloc Wars, Halfman led the Trollocs in battle, under the Dreadlords. He scared me, Rand said faintly. He just looked at me and... He shivered. No need for shame, sheepherder. They scare me too. I've seen men who have been soldiers all their lives freeze like a bird facing a snake when they confronted a half-man. In the north, in the borderlands along the Great Blight, there is a saying. The look of the eyeless is fear. The eyeless? Rand said. Lan nodded. Myrddraal see like eagles in darkness or in light, but they have no eyes. I can think of few things more dangerous than facing a Myrddraal. Moraine Sedai and I both tried to kill the one that was here last night, and we failed every time. Halfmen have the Dark One's own luck. Rand swallowed. The Trolloc said the Myrddraal wanted to talk to me. I didn't know what it meant. Lan's head jerked up. His eyes were blue stones. You talked to a Trolloc? Not exactly, Rand stammered. The warder's gaze held him like a trap. It talked to me. It said it wouldn't hurt me, that the Myrddraal wanted to talk to me. Then it tried to kill me. He licked his lips and rubbed his hand along the knobby leather of the sword hilt. In short, choppy sentences, he explained about returning to the farmhouse. I killed it instead, he finished. By accident, really. It jumped at me and I had the sword in my hand. Lan's face softened slightly, if rock could be said to soften. Even so, that is something to speak of, sheepherder. Until last night, there were few men south of the borderlands who could say they had seen a Trolloc, much less killed one. And fewer still who have slain a Trolloc alone and unaided, Moraine said wearily. It is done, Rand. Lan, help me out. The warder sprang to her side, but he was no quicker than Rand darting to the bed. Tam's skin was cool to the touch, though his face had a pale, washed-out look, as if he had spent far too long out of the sun. His eyes were still closed, but he drew the deep breaths of normal sleep. He will be all right now? Rand asked anxiously. With rest, yes, Moraine said. A few weeks in bed, and he will be as good as ever. She walked unsteadily, despite holding Lan's arm. He swept her cloak and staff from the chair cushion for her to sit, and she eased herself down with a sigh. With a slow care, she rewrapped the Angreal, returned it to her pouch. Rand's shoulders shook. He bit his lip to keep from laughing. At the same time, he had to scrub a hand across his eyes to clear away tears. Thank you. In the age of legends, Moraine went on, some Aes Sedai could fan life and health to flame if only the smallest spark remained. Those days are gone, though, perhaps forever. So much was lost. Not just the making of Angreal. So much that could be done which we dare not even dream of, if we remember it at all. There are far fewer of us now. Some talents are all but gone, and many that remain seem weaker. Now there must be both will and strength for the body to draw on, and even the strongest of us can do nothing in the way of healing. It is fortunate that your father is a strong man, both in body and spirit. As it is, he used up much of his strength in the fight for life. But all that is left now is for him to recuperate. That will take time, but the taint is gone. I can never repay you, he told her without taking his eyes from Tam. But anything I can do for you, I will. Anything at all. He remembered the talk of prices then, and his promise. Kneeling beside Tam, he meant it even more than before, but it still was not easy to look at her. Anything. As long as it does not hurt the village or my friends. Moraine raised a hand dismissively. If you think it is necessary, I would like to talk with you anyway. You will no doubt leave at the same time we do, and we can speak at length then. Leave? He exclaimed, scrambling to his feet. Is it really that bad? Everyone looked to me as if they were ready to start rebuilding. We are pretty settled folk in the Two Rivers. Nobody ever leaves. Rand. And where would we go? Hadan Thane said the weather is just as bad everywhere else. He was the peddler. The Trollocs. Rand swallowed, wishing Tom Marilyn had not told him what Trollocs ate. The best I can see to do is stay right here where we belong, in the Two Rivers, and put things back together. We have crops in the ground, and it has to warm enough for the shearing soon. I don't know who started this talk about leaving. One of the Complans, I'll bet. But whoever it was... Sheepherder, Lan broke in. You talk when you should be listening. He blinked at both of them. He had been half babbling, he realized, and he had rambled on while she tried to talk. While an Aes Sedai tried to talk. He wondered what to say, how to apologize, but Moraine smiled while he was still thinking. I understand how you feel, Rand, she said, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she really did. Think no more of it. Her mouth tightened, and she shook her head. I have handled this badly, I see. I should have rested first, I suppose. It is you who will be leaving, Rand. You who must leave for the sake of your village. Me? He cleared his throat and tried again. Me? It sounded a little better this time. Why do I have to go? I don't understand any of this. I don't want to go anywhere. Moraine looked at Lan, and the warder unfolded his arms. He looked at Rand from under his leather headband, and Rand had the feeling of being weighed on invisible scales again. Did you know, Lan said suddenly, that some homes were not attacked? Half the village is in ashes, he protested, but the warder waved it away. Some houses were only torched to create confusion. The Trollocs ignored them afterwards, and the people who fled from them as well, unless they actually got in the way of the true attack. Most of the people who've come in from the outlying farms never saw a hair of a Trolloc, and that only at a distance. Most never knew there was any trouble until they saw the village. I did hear about Darl Copland, Rand said slowly. I suppose it just didn't sink in. 2 farms were attacked, Lan went on. Yours and one other. Because of Beltane, everyone who lived at the second farm was already in the village. Many people were saved because the Myrddraal was ignorant of Two Rivers customs. Festival and Winter Night made its task all but impossible, but it did not know that. Rand looked at Moraine, leaning back in the chair. But she said nothing, and watched him, a finger laid across her lips. Our farm and who else's? he asked finally. The Ibarra farm, Lan replied. Here in Emmonsfield, they struck first at the forge, and the blacksmith's house, and Master Cawthon's house. Rand's mouth was suddenly dry. That's crazy, he managed to get out, then jumped as Moraine straightened. Not crazy, Rand, she said. Purposeful. The Trollocs did not come to Emmonsfield by happenstance, and they did not do what they did for the pleasure of killing and burning, however much that delighted them. They knew what, or rather who, they were after. The Trollocs came to kill or capture young men of a certain age who lived near Emmonsfield. My age? Rand's voice shook, and he did not care. Light? Matt? What about Perrin? Alive and well, Moraine assured him, if a trifle sooty. Van Craw and then Thane? Whenever in any danger, Lan said. At least, no more than anyone else. But they saw the rider, the Fade too, and they're the same age as I am. Master Craw's house was not even damaged, Moraine said, and the miller and his family slept through half the attack before the noise woke them. Van is 10 months older than you, and Lem 8 months younger. She smiled dryly at his surprise. I told you I asked questions. I also said young men of a certain age. You and your two friends are within weeks of one another. It was you three the Myrddraal sought, and none others. Rand shifted uneasily, wishing she would not look at him like that, as if her eyes could pierce his brain and read what lay in every corner of it. What would they want with us? We're just farmers, shepherds. That is a question that has no answer in the Two Rivers, Moraine said quietly. But the answer is important. Trollocs, where they have not been seen in almost 2,000 years, tells us that much. Lots of stories tell about Trolloc raids, Rand said stubbornly. We just never had one here before. Warders fight Trollocs all the time. Lan snorted. Boy, I expect to fight Trollocs along the Great Blight, but not here. Nearly 600 leagues to the south. That was as hot a raid last night as I'd expect to see in Shinar, or any of the borderlands. In one of you, Moraine said. Or all three. There is something the Dark One fears. That's impossible. Rand stumbled to the window and stared out at the village, the people working among the ruins. I don't care what's happened. That is just impossible. Something on the green caught his eye. He stared, then realized it was the blackened stump of the spring pole. Fine Beltane, the peddler and a gleeman, not strangers. He shivered and shook his head violently. No, I'm a shepherd. The Dark One can't be interested in me. It took a great deal of effort, Lan said grimly, to bring so many Trollocs so far without raising a hue and cry from the borderlands to Caemlyn and beyond. Wish I knew how they did it. Do you really believe they went to all that bother just to burn a few houses? They will be back, Moraine added. Rand had his mouth open to argue with Lan, but that brought him up short. He spun to face her. Back? Can't you stop them? You did last night and you were surprised then. Now you know they are here. Perhaps, Moraine replied. I could send to Tar Valon for some of my sisters. They might have time to make the journey before we need them. The Myrddraal knows I am here too. And it probably will not attack, not openly at least, lacking reinforcements. More Myrddraal and more Trollocs. With enough Aes Sedai and enough warders, the Trollocs can be beaten off. Though I cannot say how many battles it will take. A vision danced in his head, Emmonsfield all in ashes. All the farms burned, and Watch Hill and Devon Ride and Tarren Ferry. All ashes and blood. No, he said, and felt a wrenching inside, as if he had lost his grip on something. That's why I have to leave, isn't it? The Trollocs won't come back if I am not here. The last trace of obstinacy made him add, if they really are after me. Moraine's eyebrows raised as if she were surprised that he was not convinced, but Lan said, are you willing to bet your village on it, sheep herder? Your whole Two Rivers? Rand's stubbornness faded. No, he said again. He felt that emptiness inside again, too. Perrin and Matt have to go too, don't they? Leaving the Two Rivers. leaving his home and his father. At least Tam would get better. At least he would be able to hear him say all that on the quarry road had been nonsense. We could go to Fairlawn, or even Camelin. I've heard there are more people in Camelin than in the whole two regions. We'd be safe there. He tried out a laugh that sounded hollow. I used to daydream about seeing Camelin. I never thought it would come about like this. There was a long silence, then Lan said, I would not count on Camelin for safety. If the Murdraw wants you badly enough, they will find a way. Walls are a poor bar to a half-man. You would be a fool not to believe they want you very badly indeed. Rand thought his spirits had sunk as low as they possibly could. With that, they slid deeper. There is a place of safety, Moraine said softly. Rand's ears pricked up to listen. In Tar Valon, you would be among Aes Sedai and warders. Even during the Trolloc Wars, the forces of the Dark One feared to attack the Shining Walls. The one attempt was their greatest defeat until the very end. And Tar Valon holds all the knowledge we Aes Sedai have gathered since the time of madness. Some fragments even date from the Age of Legends. In Tar Valon, if anywhere, you will be able to learn why the Murdraw want you. Why the Father of Lions wants you. That I can promise. Only all of us beyond this. On the journey to a place where you'll be surrounded by Aes Sedai.
You're going down!
But there were all those stories. It was uncomfortable enough to be in a room with one Aes Sedai, but to insist all of them? And she still had not demanded her price. There was always a price, so the stories said. How long will my father sleep? He asked at last. I have to tell him. He shouldn't just wake and find me gone. He thought he heard Lan give a sigh of relief. He looked at the water curiously, but Lan's face was as expressionless as ever. It is unlikely he will wake before we depart, Moraine said. I mean to go soon after full dark. Even a single day of delay could be fatal. It will be best if you leave him alone. No, Rand said doubtfully. Lan nodded. The Halfling will discover we are gone soon enough. There is no need to make things easier for us than we must. Rand fussed with his father's blanket. It was a very long way to Targon. In that case, I'm going to go find Matt and Tam. I will attend to that. Moraine got to her feet briskly and donned her cloak, suddenly restored vigor. She put a hand on his shoulder. He tried very hard not to flinch. She did not press hard, but it was an iron grip that held him as surely as a forked stick held his neck. It will be best to keep all of this just among us. Understand? Someone dragon's thing on the inn door might make it. He drew a released breath and took a hand. So she had not noticed his reaction. Then you need to sleep. The door closed behind them. Rand stood looking down at Tam. Looking at Tam, but seeing nothing. Not until that very minute had he realized that Emond's Field was a part of him as much as he was a part of it. He realized it now because he knew that was what he had felt tearing loose. He was apart from the village now. The Shepherd of the Night wanted him. It was impossible. He was only a farmer. But the Trollocs had come. Lan was right about one thing. He could not risk the village on the chance Moraine was wrong. He could not even tell anyone. The Coplans really would make trouble about something like that. He had to trust in Aes Sedai. Don't wake him now, Mistress Alvear said, as the mayor shut the door behind his wife and himself. The cloth-covered tray she carried gave off delicious, warm smells. She set it on the chest against the wall, then firmly moved Rand away from the bed. Mistress Moraine told me what he needs, she said softly. And it does not include you falling on top of him from exhaustion. I've brought you a bite to eat. Don't let it get cold now.
I wish you wouldn't call her that,
Rand said peevishly.
Moraine Sedai is proper. She might get mad.
Mistress Alvear gave him a pat on the cheek. You just leave me to worry about that. She and I have a long talk. Keep your voice down. If you wake Tam, you'll have to answer to me and Moraine Sedai. She she put an emphasis on Lorraine's title that made Brand's insistence seem foolish. The two of you keep out of my way. A fond smile for her husband, she turned to the bed and Tam. Master Alvear gave Brand a frustrated look. She's an Aes Sedai. Half the women in the village act as if she sits in a women's circle, and the rest as if she were a trunk. Not a one of them seems to realize you have to be careful around Aes Sedai. The men may keep looking at her sideways, but at least they aren't doing anything that might provoke her. Careful. It was not too late to start being careful. Master Alvear, he said slowly, do you know how many farms were attacked? Only 2 that I've heard of so far, including your place. The mayor paused, frowning, and shrugged. It doesn't seem enough with what happened here. I should be glad of it, but... well, we'll probably hear of more before the day is out. Brand sighed. No need to ask which farms. Here in the village, did they... was there anything to show what they were after? After, boy? I don't know that they were after anything, except maybe killing us all. It was just the way I said. The dogs barking, and Moraine Sedai and Land running through the streets. Then somebody shouted that Master Luhan's house and the forge were on fire. Abu Cawthan's house flared up. Odd that, it's nearly in the middle of the village. Anyway, the next thing the Trollocs were all among us. No, I don't think they were after anything. He gave an abrupt bark of a laugh and cut it short with a wary look at his wife. He did not look around for Tam. To tell the truth, he went on more quietly, they seemed almost as confused as we were. I doubt they expected to find an Aes Sedai here, or a warder. I suppose not, Brand said, grimacing. If Moraine had told the truth about that, she probably had told the truth about the rest, too. For a moment, he thought about asking the mayor's advice, but Master Alvear obviously knew little more about Aes Sedai than anyone else in the village. Besides, he was willing to tell even the mayor what was going on, what Moraine said was going on. He was not sure he was more afraid of being laughed at or being believed. He rubbed his thumb against the ground. His father had been out into the world. He must know more about Aes Sedai than the mayor.
Target acquired.
Maybe what he had said in the West.
Go!
He scrubbed both his hands to his hair, scattering his fine thoughts. You need to be safe, the mayor said. Yes, Mr. Alvear added. You're almost falling down where you stand. Brand blinked at her. He did not even realize he had left his father. He did need sleep. Just the thought set off a yawn. You can take the bed of the next. There's already a fire laid. Brand looked at his father. Tam was still deep in sleep. I'd rather stay in here if you don't mind. For when he wakes up. Sick room matters were in Mistress Alvear's province. The mayor left it to her. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. But you let him wake on his own. You bother his sleep. He tried to say he would do as she ordered, but the words got tangled in yet another yawn. She shook her head with a smile. You will be asleep yourself in no time at all. If you must stay, curl up next to the fire, and drink a little of that beef broth before you doze off. I will, Brand said. He would have agreed to anything that kept him in that room. And I won't wake him. See that you do not, Mistress Alvear told him firmly, but not in an unkindly way. I'll bring you up a pillow and some blankets. When the door finally closed behind them, Brand dragged the lone chair in the room over beside the bed and sat down where he could watch Tam. It was all very well for Mistress Alvear to talk about sleep. His jaws cracked as he stifled a yawn. But he could not sleep yet. Tam might wake at any time, and maybe only stay awake a short while. Brand had to be waiting when he did. He grimaced and twisted in the chair, absently shifting the sword hilt out of his ribs. He still felt awkward about telling anyone what Moraine had said. But this was Tam, after all. This was... Without realizing it, he set his jaw determinedly. My father. I can tell my father anything. He twisted a little more in the chair and put his head against the chair back. Tam was his father, and nobody could tell him what to say or not say to his father. He just had to stay awake until Tam woke up. He just had to... Chapter 9. Tellings of the Wheel. Brand's heart pounded as he ran. He stared in dismay at the barren hills surrounding him. This was not just a place where spring was late in coming. Spring had never come here, and never would come. Nothing grew in the cold soil that crunched under his boots, not so much as a bit of lichen. He scrambled past boulders twice as tall as he was. Dust coated the stone, as if never a drop of rain had touched it. The sun was a swollen, blood-red ball, more fiery than on the hottest day of summer, and bright enough to sear his eyes. But it stood dark against a leaden cauldron of a sky where clouds of sharp black and silver boiled and boiled on every horizon. For all the swirling clouds, though, no breath of breeze stirred across the land. Despite the sullen sun, the air burned cold like the depth of winter. Rand looked over his shoulder often as he ran, but he could not see his pursuers. Only desolate hills and jagged black mountains, many topped by tall plumes of dark smoke rising to join the milling clouds. He could not see his hunters, though. He could hear them, howling behind him, guttural voices shouting with the glee of the chase, howling with the joy of the blood to come. Trolling, coming closer, and his strength was almost gone. With desperate haste, he scrambled to the top of a knife-edged ridge, then dropped to his knees with a groan. Below him, a sheer rock wall fell away, 1,000-foot cliff plummeting into a vast canyon. Steamy mists covered the canyon floor, their thick gray surface rolling grim waves, rolling and breaking against the cliff beneath him, but more slowly than any ocean had ever moved. Patches of fog glowed red for an instant, as if great fires had suddenly flared beneath and died. Thunder rumbled in the depths of the valley, and lightning crackled through the gray, sometimes striking into the sky. It was not the valley itself that sapped his strength, so the empty spaces left with helplessness. From the center of the furious vapors, the mountain stretched upward. A mountain taller than any he had ever seen in the mountains of Mist. A mountain as black as the loss of all hope. That bleak stone spire, a dagger stabbing at the heavens, was the source of his desolation. He had never seen it before, but he knew it. The memory of it flashed away like quicksilver when he tried to touch it, but the memory was there. He knew it was there. Unseen fingers touched him, pulled at his arms and legs, trying to draw him to the mountain. His body twitched, ready to obey. His arms and legs stiffened, as if he thought he could dig his fingers and toes into the stone. Ghostly strings entwined around his heart, pulling him to the Spire Mountain. Tears ran down his face, and he sagged to the ground. He felt his will draining away like water out of a whole bucket. Just a little longer, and he would go where he was called. He would obey, do as he was told. Abruptly, he discovered another emotion. Anger. Push him, pull him. He was not a sheep to be prodded into a pen. The anger squeezed itself into one hard knot, and he clung to it as he would have clung to a raft in a flood. Serve me, a voice whispered in the stillness of his mind. A familiar voice. If he listened hard enough, he was sure he would know it. Serve me. He shook his head to try to get it out of his head. Serve me. He shook his fist at the Black Mountain. The light consume your shaitan.
Target acquired.
Abruptly, the smell of death left the ground. A figure loomed over him in a cloak the color of dried blood. With a finger. He did not want to see the face that looked down at him. He did
Turn
not
the
want to think
tide.
of that face. It hurt to think of it. Turned his mind to embers. Angry. Not caring if he fell over the edge, he threw himself away. He had to get away. Far away. Flailing at the air, wanting to scream, finding no breath for screaming, no breath at all. Abruptly, he was no longer in the barren land, no longer falling. Winter brown grass scratched around his boots,
Let's wrap this up.
streamed like flowers. He almost laughed as he scattered trees and bushes, leafless as they were, dotting the gently rolling plain that now surrounded him. In the distance reared a single mountain, broken and split. This mountain brought no fear or despair. This was just a mountain, oddly out of place, with no other in sight. Broad river flowed by the mountain. On an island in the middle of that river was a city.
Turn the tide.
Older than a demon's tale. A city surrounded by high walls, gleaming white and silver beneath the warm sun. With mingled relief and joy, he started for the walls, for the safety and serenity he somehow knew he would find behind them. As he came closer, he made out soaring towers, many joined by wondrous walkways that spanned the open air. High bridges arced from both banks of the river to the island city. Even at a distance, he could see lacy stonework on those spans, seemingly too delicate to withstand the swift waters that rushed beneath them. Beyond those bridges lay safety, sanctuary. Of a sudden, a chill ran along his bones. An icy clamminess settled on his skin, and the air around him turned fetid and dank. Without looking back, he ran from the pursuer whose freezing fingers brushed his back and tugged at his cloak. Ran from the light-eating figure with the face that... He could not remember the face, except his terror. He did not want to remember the face. He ran, and the ground passed beneath his feet, rolling hills and flat plain. And he wanted to howl like a dog gone mad. The city was receding before him. The harder he ran, the further away drifted the white shining walls and haven. They grew smaller and smaller until only a pale speck remained on the horizon. The cold hand of his pursuer clutched at his collar. Those fingers touched him. He knew he would go mad, or worse, much worse. Even as that surety came to him, he tripped and fell. No! He screamed, and grunted as paving stones smacked the breath out of him. Wonderingly, he got to his feet. He stood on the approaches to one of the marvelous bridges he had seen rearing over the river. Smiling people walked by on either side of him. People dressed in so many colors they made him think of a field of wildflowers. Some of them spoke to him, but he could not understand, though the words sounded as if he should. But the faces were friendly, and the people gestured him onward, over the bridge with its intricate stonework, onward toward the shining, silver-streaked walls and the towers beyond, toward the safety he knew waited there. He joined the throng streaming across the bridge and into the city through massive gates set in tall, pristine walls. Within was a wonderland, where the meanest structure seemed a palace. It was as though the builders had been told to take stone and brick and tile and create beauty to take the breath of mortal men. There was no building, no monument that did not make him stare with goggling eyes. Music drifted down the streets, 100 different songs, but all blending with the clamor of the crowds to make one grand, joyous harmony. The sense of sweet
Let's wrap
perfume
this up.
and sharp spices, of wondrous fruits and myriad flowers all floated in the air, as if every good smell in the world were gathered there. The street by which he entered the city, broad, paved with smooth gray stone, stretched straight before him toward the center of the city. At its end loomed a tower larger and taller than any other in the city. The tower as white as fresh fallen snow. That tower was where safety lay, and the knowledge he sought. But the city was such as he had never dreamed of seeing. Surely it would not matter if he delayed just a short time in going to the tower. He turned aside onto a narrower street where jugglers strolled among hawkers of strange fruits. Ahead of him down the street was a snow-white tower. A sun tower. In just a little while, he thought, he rounded another corner. At the far end of this street, too, lay the white tower. Suddenly, he turned another corner.
You're open!
The alabaster tower met his eyes. He spun to run away from it. He was afraid to look over his shoulder, afraid it would be there. The faces around him were still friendly, but shining hope filled them now. Hope he had broken. Still the people gestured him forward, pleading gestures. Toward the tower. Their eyes shone with desperate need, and only he could fulfill it. Only he could save them. Very well, he thought. The tower was, after all, where he wanted to go. Even as he took his first step forward, disappointment faded from those about him, and smiles wreathed every face. They moved with him, and small children strewed his path with flower petals. He looked over his shoulder in confusion, wondering who the flowers were meant for, but behind him were only more smiling people, gesturing him on. They must be for me, he thought, and wondered why that suddenly did not seem strange at all. But wonderment lasted only a moment before melting away. All was as it should be. First one, then another of the people began to sing until every voice was lifted into a glorious anthem. He still could not understand
You're
the
open!
words, but a dozen instrumental harmonies shouted joy and salvation. Musicians capered through the onslowing crowd, adding flutes, harps, and drums, and a dozen signs to the hymn. And all the songs he had heard before blended in without seeing.
Go!
Girls danced around him, laying garlands of sweet-smelling blossoms across his shoulders, twining them about his neck. They smiled at him, their delight growing with every step he took. He could not help but smile back. His feet itched to join in their dance, and even as he thought of it, he was dancing, his steps fitting in as if he had known it all from birth. He threw back his head and laughed. His feet were lighter than they had ever been, dancing with... He could not remember the name, but it did not seem important. It is your destiny, a voice whispered in his head. The whisper was a thread in the paean. Carrying him like a twig on the crest of a wave, the crowd flowed into a huge square in the middle of the city. And for the first time, he saw that the White Tower rose from a great palace of pale marble, sculpted rather than built, curving walls and swelling domes and delicate spires fingering the sky. The whole of it made him gasp in awe. Broad stairs of pristine stone led up from the square, and at the foot of those stairs the people halted, but their song rose ever higher. The swelling voices buoyed his feet. Destiny, the voice whispered, insistent now, eager. He no longer danced, but neither did he stop. He mounted the stairs without hesitation. This was where he belonged. Scrollwork covered the massive doors at the top of the stairs, carvings so intricate and delicate that he could not imagine a knife blade fine enough to fit. The portals swung open, and he went in. They closed behind him with an echoing crash like thunder. I've been waiting for you, the Murdral hissed.
In a recently convened emergency conference, the Sanctum...
Sat bolt upright, gasping for breath and shivering, staring. Tam was still asleep on the bed. Slowly, his breathing slowed. Half-consumed logs blazed in the fireplace around the fire.
That's it!
A blanket
Tear it up! Ice him over! That's it! Tear it up! Feel the cold? That's it! Ice him over! Cool him off!
Way to go! He twitched aside the white napkin. Despite the time he had slept, the beef broth was still warm. And so was the crusty bread. Mr. Salvier's hand was playing. Betrayed from her friends. Once she decided you needed a hot meal, she did not give up till it was inside you. He gulped down some broth,
What's
and it was
up?
all he could do to put some meat and cheese
Where
between
have
two
you
pieces
been?
of bread before stuffing it in his mouth.
I got taken
Taking
in.
big bites,
Wait,
he went back
what?
to the bed.
Not by enemies.
Mr.
It was
Salvier
the
had apparently
cavalry,
seen to Tam as
not
well.
Psychom.
Tam had
Leader's
been undressed,
name is Raines.
his clothes
He
now
said he'd
clean
lend
and
us
neatly folded on the
Lucia a
bedside
hand.
table, and the
So
blanket was
now,
drawn up under his chin.
Your hero is
Rand
back.
touched his father's forehead. Tam opened his eyes.
Why would the army help us? That doesn't make sense.
Marin said you were here.
The military's got all
You couldn't even
kinds.
sit up to see.
Not all of them like the Sanctum.
She said you were too tired for her to wake.
Don't worry.
Just so I could
I'll
look at
handle
you.
the bad guys. Come on.
Even Brand can't get around her when she has her mind set. Tam's voice was weak, but his gaze was clear and steady. Yes, the guy was right, Brand thought. With rest, he would be as good as ever. Can I get you something to eat? Mr. Salvier left a tray. You fed me already. You shouldn't call it that. Wouldn't let me have anything but broth. How can a man avoid bad dreams with nothing but broth in his... Tam fumbled a hand from under the cover and touched the sword at Brand's waist. It wasn't a dream. When Marin told me I was sick, I thought I had been... But you're all right. That is all that matters. What of the farm? Brand took a deep breath. The Trollocs killed the sheep. I think they took the cow, too. And the house needs a good cleaning. He managed a weak smile. We were luckier than some. They burned half the village. He told Tam everything that had happened, or at least most of it. Tam listened closely and asked sharp questions, so he found himself having to tell about returning to the farmhouse from the woods. That brought in the Trolloc he had killed. He had to tell how Nynaeve had said Tam was dying to explain why the Aes Sedai attended him instead of the Wizard. Tam's eyes widened at that. Aes Sedai and Emond's Field. But Rand could see no need to go over every step of the journey from the farm, or his fears, or the Myrddraal on the road. Certainly not his nightmares as he slept at bed. Especially he saw no reason to mention Tam's ramblings under the fever. Not yet. Moraine's story, though, there was no avoiding that. Now that's a tale to make a demon proud, Tam muttered when he was done. What would Trollocs want with you boys? Or the Dark One might help us. You think she was lying? Master Alvira said she was telling the truth about only 2 farms being attacked. And about Master Luhan's house and Master Cawthon's. For a moment, Tam lay silent before saying, "Tell me what she said. Her exact words, mind.
Ice tracks.
Just as she said them." Rand struggled. Whoever remembered the exact words they heard? He chewed at his lip and scratched his head, and bit by bit, he brought it out as nearly as he could remember. "I can't think of anything else," he finished.
That's some kind of
lassie
power?
Sure she didn't say a little differently, but it's close anyway. It's good enough. It has to be, doesn't it? You see, lad, Aes Sedai are tricksome. They don't lie, not right out. The truth an Aes Sedai tells you is not always the truth you think it is. Take care around her. I've heard the stories, Rand retorted. I'm not a child. So you're not. So you're not. Tam sighed heavily, then shrugged in annoyance. I should be going along with you just the same. The world outside the 2 rivers is nothing like Emond's Field. That was an opening to ask about Tam going outside and all the rest of it, but Tam did not take it. His mouth fell open instead. Just like that? I thought you would try to talk me out of it. I thought you'd have 100 reasons I should not go. He realized he had been hoping Tam would have 100 reasons, and good ones. Maybe not 100, Tam said with a snort. But a few did come to mind. Only they don't count for much. If Trollocs are after you, you will be safer in Tar Valon than you could ever be here. Just remember to be wary. Aes Sedai do things for their own reasons. And those are not always the reasons you think. The Greenman said something like that, Rand said slowly. And he knows what he's talking about. You listen sharp, think deep, guard your tongue. That's good advice for any dealings beyond the 2 rivers, but most especially with Aes Sedai. And with warders. Tell Lan something, and you've as good as told Moraine. If he's a warder, then he's bonded to her as sure as the sun rose this morning. And he won't keep many secrets from her, if any. Rand knew little about the bonding between Aes Sedai and warders, though it played a big part in every story about warders he had ever heard. It was something to do with the power, a gift to the warder, or maybe some sort of exchange. The warders got all sorts of benefits, according to the stories. They healed more quickly than other men, and could go longer without food or water or sleep. Supposedly, they could sense Trollocs if they were close enough, and other creatures of the Dark One too, which explained how Lan and Moraine had tried to warn the village before the attack. As to what the Aes Sedai got out of it, the stories were silent. But he was not about to believe they did not get something. I'll be careful, Rand said. I just wish I knew why. It doesn't make any sense. Why me? Why us? I wish I knew too, boy. Blood and ashes, I wish I knew. Tam sighed heavily. Well, no use trying to put a broken egg back in the shell, I suppose. Lesson, you have to go. I'll be back in my feet in a day or two, and we can see about starting a new flock. Oren Daughtry has some good stock he might be willing to part with the pasture's all gone. And so does John Thane. Moraine, the Aes Sedai said you had to stay in bed. She said weeks. Tam opened his mouth, but Rand went on. And she talked to Mistress Alvir. Well, maybe I can talk Marin around. Tam did not sound hopeful of it, though. He gave Rand a sharp look. The way you avoided answering means you have to leave soon.
Nothing to worry about!
Tam nodded sadly.
How about this?
It must be
Nice one!
best not to delay. But we will see about
How about this?
He's looked at his blanket with more irritation than strength.
Great stuff, Hope!
I'll follow in a few days anyway. Catch you up on the road. See if Marn can keep me in bed when I want to get up. Just after the door. Headed. Say your goodbyes quickly, Murder. There may be trouble. Trouble? Bram said. The warder growled at him impatiently. Just hurry. Hastily, Bram snatched up his cloak. He started to undo the sword belt, but didn't protest.
How about this?
You will probably have more need of it than I. Though the light willing, neither of us will. Ignoring Lan's continued growls, Rand bent to grab Tam in the hollow. I will come back. I promise you that. Of course you will. Tam laughed. He returned the hug weakly, and ended by patting Rand on the back. I know that. They'll have twice as many sheep for you to tend when you return. Now go, before that fellow does himself an injury. Rand tried to hang back, tried to find the words for the question he did not want to ask. But Lan entered the room to catch him by the arm and pull him into the hall. The warder had donned a dull gray-green tunic of overlapping metal scales. His voice rasped with irritation. They have to hurry. Don't you understand the word trouble? Outside the room, Nat waited, cloaked and coated, and carrying his bow. A quiver hung at his waist. He was rocking anxiously on his heels, and he kept glancing off toward the stairs with what seemed to be equal parts impatience and fear. This isn't much like the stories, Rand, is it? He said hoarsely. What kind of trouble? Rand demanded. But the warder ran ahead of him instead of answering, taking the steps down 2 at a time. Matt dashed after him with quick gestures for Rand to follow. Shrugging into his cloak, he caught up to them downstairs. Only a feeble light filled the common room. Half the candles had burned out, and most of the rest were guttering.
How about
It was
this?
empty except for the 3 of them. Matt stood next to one of the front windows, peeping out as if trying not to be seen. Van held the door open a crack, peered into the yard. Wondering what they could be watching, Rand went to join him. The warder muttered at him to take a care, but he did open the door a trifle wider to make room for Rand to look through. At first he was not sure exactly what he was seeing. A crowd of village men, some 3 dozen or so, clustered near the burned-out husk of the peddler's wagon, night pushed back by the torches some of them carried. Moraine faced them, her back to the inn, leaning with seeming casualness. Harry Copland stood in the front of the group with his brother Darl and Billy Conger. Sen Bowie was there as well. Uncomfortable. Rand was startled to see Harry shake his fist at Moraine. Leave Evan still! Our face farmer shouted. A few voices in the crowd echoed him, but hesitantly, and no one pushed forward. They might be willing to confront an Aes Sedai from within a crowd, but none of them wanted to be singled out. Not by an Aes Sedai who had every reason to take offense. You brought those monsters! Darl roared. He waved a torch over his head, and there were shouts of, You brought them, and it's your fault! Led by his cousin Billy. Harry
How about this?
and the old bachelor pursed his lips and gave him a sidelong glare. Those things, Scarlet didn't appear until after you came. He muttered, loud enough to be heard. On his head from side to side, dourly, wishing somewhere else, and looking for a way to get there. You're an Aes Sedai. We want none of your sort. Aes Sedai bring trouble on their backs. You say, will only bring more. His speech brought no response from the gathered villagers.
You see that?
Scowled at frustration.
We do this together!
Darl's torch and shook it in her direction. Get
That's
out!
it!
I will burn you out!
Feel the cold? Beyond the occasional shaking of a fist. Sen Bowie, Billy Conger, and the Coplands were left out front alone. Billy looked as if he wanted to back away too. Ari gave an uneasy start at the lack of support, but he recovered quickly. Get out! He shouted again, echoed by Darl, and more weakly by Billy. Ari glared at the others. Most of the crowd failed to meet his eye. There's nothing we can't do!
Suddenly, Bran Alvear and Harol Luhan moved out of the shadows, walking apart from both the Aes Sedai and the crowd. In one hand, the mayor casually carried the big wooden maul he used to drive spigots in the cabin.
Yeah, the two goblins stepped back and then Billy edged away from them. Billy Conger dived into the crowd. Not that! Charles said, we never said that, Frank. Mayor. Brand. Then threatening to harm Dexter.
Great stuff, Hope!
He's an eye to eye! Harry began angrily, but his words cut off as Harald Luhan moved. The blacksmith
How about this?
thrusting big arms over his head, tightening massive fists until his mouth. But Harry looked at the burly man, and it was one of those fists that was holding over his neck.
How about this?
Harald folded his arms across his chest. Your pardon, Harry. I do not mean to cut
How about this?
you were saying. But Harry, shoulders hunched as though he were trying to draw into himself and
Time to switch, kiddo.
Big Alcar, your boy's leg was broken last night, but I saw him walking on it today because of her. Ewart Candy,
Thanks, Hope.
you were lying on your belly with a gash down your back like a fish for cleaning, till she laid hands on you. Now it looks as if it happened a month ago. And unless I misdoubt, there'll be barely...
Thanks, partner.
And you, Sam. The Thatcher started to fade back into the crowd, but stopped. Held uncomfortably by Brand's gaze. I'd be shocked to see any man in the village now. But you, most of all. Your arm will still be hanging useless at your side, a massive burns and bruises, if not for her. If you have no gratitude, have you no shame? Then Thatcher took his right hand and pushed away from it angrily. I cannot deny what she did, he muttered. He helped me. But she was an ice diver.
How about this?
Those products didn't come because of her. Why did they come? We want no part of ice to die in the Two Rivers. Let them keep their trouble back. A few men, safely back in the crowd, shouted that. We want no ice to die trouble. Send her away. Drive her out. Why did
Just
they come
too
because of
easy.
her? A scowl grew on Brand's face, but before he could speak, Moiraine suddenly whirled her vine-carved staff above her head, spinning it with both hands. Brand's staff echoed that of the villagers, for a hissing white flame flared from each end of the staff, standing straight out like spear points despite the rod whirling. Even Bran and Harl edged away from her. She snapped her arms down straight out before her, the staff parallel to the ground, but the pale fire still jetted out, brighter than the torches. Men shied away, held up hands to shield their eyes from the pain of that brilliance. Is this what Aemon's blood has come to? The Aes Sedai's voice was not loud, but it overwhelmed every other sound.
Nothing to worry about.
Little people squabbling for the right to hide my rabbits. You have forgotten who you were. Forgotten what you were. But I have one small part of it left. Some memory in blood and bone. Some shred to steel you for the long night. No one. Never wanted to open their mouth again. Bran said,
Later!
honest farmers and shepherds and craftsmen. Two rivers. To the south. Lies the river you go over once. But far to the east of here, men call it still by its right name. Manetheren Red. In the old tongue, waters of a mountain home. Sparkling waters that once coursed through a land of bravery and beauty. 2,000 years ago, Manetheren Drell flowed by the walls of a mountain city, so lovely to behold that Ogier stonemasons came to stare in wonder. Farms and villages covered this region.
This is just a part of Operation
That you call
Nora.
the Forest of Shadows as well, and beyond. But all of those folk thought of themselves as the people of the mountain home, the people of Manetheren. Their king was Aemon Alcar al-Thorin, Aemon, son of Car, son of Thorin, and Eldraine, Elan, Thorin, was his queen. Aemon, a man who stood at the greatest compliment for courage any could give, even among his enemies, to say a man had Aemon's heart. Eldraine, so beautiful that it would take the flowers bloom to make her smile. Brave, beauty and wisdom, the love that could not thunder. Weep if you have a heart for the loss of them, for the loss of even their mother. Weep for the loss of their blood. She fell silent then, but no one spoke. Brand was as bound as the others in the spell she had created. When she spoke again, he drank it in, and so did the rest. For nearly 2 centuries, the Trolloc Wars had ravaged the length and breadth of the world. And wherever battles raged, the Red Eagle banner of Manetheren was in the forefront. The men of Manetheren were a thorn to the Dark One's foot, and a bramble to his hand. Thing of Manetheren that would never bend knee to the shadow.
Just
Thing of
waiting for the
Manetheren,
right moment.
the sword that could not be broken. They were far away, the men of Manetheren.
We fight
on the
and we
field
survive!
called the Field of Blood, when news came that a Trolloc army was moving against their home. Too far to do else but wait to hear of their land. The forces of the Dark One meant to make an end of them. Kill the mighty host of Iron away. Too far to do else but more. But they were the men of the mountain. Without hesitation, without thought for the distance they must travel, they marched from the very field of victory, still covered in dust.
You see that?
Day and night they marched. They had seen the horror of the army left behind them. No man had ever such a
How about this?
They moved as if their feet had wings, marching further and further than friends hoped or enemies feared they could. And day that march alone would have inspired song. The Dark One's army swooped down upon the land.
How about this?
The men of the mountain home stood before it.
Time to switch, kiddo.
To the tower. Some villager raised a small speargun, but Moraine kept on as if he had not heard. The host that faced the men of Manetheren was enough to daunt the bravest heart. Ravens blackened the sky. Trollocs
Thanks,
blackened
partner.
the land. Trollocs and their human allies. Trollocs and dark friends in tens of thousands. And Dreadlords to command. At night their cookfires outnumbered the stars. And dawn
How about
revealed the banner
this?
of Baalzamon at their head.
Hope, follow my lead.
Baalzamon, heart of the dark. An ancient name for the father of lies. The Dark One could not have been free from prison at Pale Blue. For if he had been, not all the forces of humankind together could have stood against him. Dreadlord, and some evil that made that light-destroying banner seem no more than right, and sent its children to the Yet they knew what they must do. Their homeland lay just across the river.
How about this?
They must keep that host of power with us from the mountain home. Aiden sent out messengers. Aid was promised they could hold for 3 days at the tower. Hold for 3 days against odds that should overwhelm them in the first hour.
How about this?
They held through an hour, and the second hour, and the third. For 3 days they
How
fought.
about this?
The land became a butcher's yard. No crossing of the Tarendrel did they use. By the third night, and they fought on alone. For 6 days, for night. And on the 10th day, Aemon knew the bitter taste of betrayal.
How about this?
No help was coming, and they could hold the river crossings no more.
It's all about teamwork.
Where did they go? Ari demanded. Short fire. Still not free, but no one was Aemon crossed the Tarendrel, Moraine told them. Enjoying the bridges behind him.
How about this?
Throughout his plans. For he knew the powers of the Trolloc Force would find a way to bring it across the river. The Trolloc crossing began, and the soldiers of Manetheren took up the fight again, to buy with their lives what hours they could for their people to escape. From the city of Manetheren, Eldraine organized the flight of her people into the deepest forests and the fastness of the mountains. But the sun did not flee. First in a trickle, then in a river, then a flood. Men went not to safety, but to join the army fighting for their land. Shepherds with bows and farmers with pitchforks, and woodsmen with axes. Women went too, children what weapons they could find and marching side by side with their men. No one made that journey who did not know they would never return. But it was their land. It had been their fathers', and it would be their children's. And they went to pay the price of it. Not a step of ground was given up until it was soaked in blood. But at the last, the army of Manetheren was driven back. Back to here. To this place you now call Emond's Field. And here the Trolloc hordes surrounded them. Her voice held the sound of cold tears. Trolloc dead and the corpses of human renegades piled up in mounds. but always more scrambled over those charnel heaps and waves of death that had no end. There could be but one finish. No man or woman who had stood beneath the banner of the Red Eagle at that day's dawning still lived when night fell. The sword that could not be broken was shattered. In the mountains of mist, alone in the emptied city of Manetheren, Eldraine
As long as I have a goal, I can
and her
fight.
heart died with him. And where her heart had been was left only a thirst for vengeance. Vengeance for her love. Vengeance for her people and her land. Driven by grief, she reached out to the true source and hurled the one power at the Trolloc army. And there the Dreadlords died wherever they stood.
I think we're almost
whether
there.
in their secret councils or exhorting their soldiers. In the passing of a breath, the Dreadlords and the generals of the Dark One's host burst into flame. Fire consumed their bodies, and terror consumed their just victorious army. Now they ran like beasts before a wildfire in the forest, with no thought for anything but escape. North and south they fled. Thousands drowned attempting to cross the Tarandrel without the aid of the Dreadlords. And at the Monethandrel, they tore down the bridges in their fright at what might be following them. Where they found people, they slew and burned. But to flee was the need that gripped them. Until at last, no one of them remained in the lands of Manetheren. They were dispersed like dust before the whirlwind. The final vengeance came more slowly, but it came. When they were hunted down by other peoples, by other armies in other lands. None was left alive of those who did murder at Amon's Field. But the price was high for Manetheren. Eldraine had drawn to herself more of the one power than any human could ever hope to wield unaided. As the enemy generals died, so did she die. And the fires that consumed her consumed the empty city of Manetheren, even the stones of it, down to the living rock of the mountains. Yet the people had been saved. Nothing was left of their farms, their villages, or their great city. Some would say there was nothing left for them, nothing but to flee to other lands, where they could begin anew. They did not say so. They had paid such a price in blood and hope for their